Egypt pulls the plug on a UN vote condemning Israeli settlements in the Palestinian territories. There was pressure from the US president-elect and Israel. Is that why Cairo capitulated? This is Inside Story. Welcome to the programme. Hello, this is Inside Story and I'm Sohail Rahman. It was a standoff at the United Nations Security Council. There was speculation the US would allow Egypt's draft resolution demanding an end to illegal Israeli settlements to pass. It would have been one of the Obama administration's final acts, but Israel expressed its opposition to the proposal. So did US President-elect Donald Trump, who, as it turns out, speak to the Egyptian president on the phone. With just hours to go, Egypt withdrew its proposal, so no vote. Did Cairo cave into pressure? And if so, why? The delayed draft proposal says Israel must immediately stop building new settlements if there's going to be any hope of a two-state solution, and that settlements already built in the Palestinian territory occupied since 1967 are illegal. The draft says borders agreed upon in 1967 cannot be changed now and calls for all countries to distinguish between the State of Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories. It also calls for immediate steps to protect civilians from violence. Now, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu urged the US to oppose the resolution. Here's what he had to say.
Israelis deeply appreciate one of the great pillars of the US-Israel alliance, the willingness over many years of the United States to stand up in the UN and veto anti-Israel resolutions. I hope the US won't abandon this policy. I hope it will abide by the principles set by President Obama himself in his speech in the UN in 2011, that peace will come not through UN resolutions, but only through direct negotiations between the parties. And that's why this proposed resolution is bad. It's bad for Israel, it's bad for the United States, and it's bad for peace.
Well, let's bring in our guests. In Bethlehem, Mustafa Barghouti, Secretary-General of the Palestinian National Initiative. In Cairo, via Skype, Timothy Kaldas, a non-resident fellow at the Tahrir Institute for Middle East Policy. And in West Jerusalem, Oded Revivi, Chief Foreign Envoy for the Yesha Council, a group representing Israeli settlements. To all of my guests, welcome to Inside Story. Timothy Kaldas, can I just bring you in to start with, just to give us an idea, what do you think has brought about this sudden change of heart by the Egyptians at the Security Council?
Well, I think that on one level, the Egyptian president has indicated clearly multiple times that he has a positive opinion of Donald Trump and he looks forward to working with Donald Trump. The reality is that President-elect Trump is likely to put a lot less pressure on the Sisi government with respect to issues surrounding human rights and the use of force. And at the same time, the Egyptian government has had a very strained relationship with the Obama administration. And so if this is an opportunity for them to stick it to Obama before he leaves office, while forging a more positive relationship with President-elect Trump, then this is a useful opportunity for the government.
OK, well, let's go to Mustafa Barghouti in Bethlehem. It's an unprecedented move, sir. Just what's your reaction, and what's the reaction of the Palestinians to this?
Well, we are very disappointed. We don't understand why this has happened. It should not have happened. And we hope that Egypt will change its mind and bring back the resolution for voting, because the resolution will not go away. It is still on the table of the Security Council. But if Egypt insists on not presenting it to the vote as we want, as Palestinians and Arabs want, then we are hopeful that New Zealand, Malaysia, Venezuela and Senegal will present the resolution for vote. It is a very essential resolution. It is not against peace, as Netanyahu says. It is against occupation, against the system of apartheid, and against the fact that Israel is violating international law with the building of every settlement. Israel and its settlers are practically committing a war crime against Palestinians, against peace in the world, and against any potential for a Palestinian statehood or what they call two-state solution.
Okay, Mr. Barghouti,
This is a very dangerous moment, and there is a golden opportunity that this time this resolution could have passed.
Well,
Yes.
you've certainly set your stall out. Let's give the programme over to Oded Ravivi, sir, in West Jerusalem. You've heard what our two previous speakers have just said. What's your response, sir, as to where you sit on this scenario?
I think the Egyptians woke up in the last minute, realizing what the Israelis have realized a long time ago, realized what the Americans have realized a long time ago. Peace can only come when you have direct negotiations. The Palestinian leadership, year after year, day after day, are ignoring their own residents, are ignoring their problems, and not coming to sit round the table to negotiate peace. You can't negotiate peace in New York, in the United Nations headquarters. You need to negotiate peace here when you see your neighbors and to try and build bridges one next to the other.
It seems that
Israel is using negotiations as a cover for settlements activities.
it seems certainly, Timothy Kaldas in Cairo, that it's no secret that the US administration's coming in and going out are poles apart on policy. Our two speakers in West Jerusalem and in Bethlehem, obviously, you can hear what they're saying. However, how do you actually analyse Mr. Trump's, President-elect Trump's intervention and how that's going to be viewed in the long term when he actually says he wants both parties to have direct talks?
Well, I think that, the reality is that this resolution wasn't going to resolve the conflict. That's not really what anyone was arguing. But laying out clearly that the world recognizes that settlements are illegal shouldn't be terribly controversial. There's pretty much a global consensus on that question outside of Israel. Even the United States, in its statements, will recognize that. I think Trump is basically trying to curry favor with his domestic base. It's an opportunity for him to exercise power vis-a-vis the outgoing president. At the same time, build a positive relationship with Netanyahu coming into office. But I don't think that Trump has a serious commitment to resolving this conflict. I don't think he has much of a serious commitment to most issues, frankly.
The Palestinian-Israeli conflict and impasse has been one that has lasted for decades. And while we don't want to try and get too bogged down in the intricacies of what's been going on, really the focus of this programme is very much Egypt and the relationship of Egypt with the Palestinians and the relationship of Egypt with Israel. Mr. Barghouti, why would Egypt work on this resolution for such a long time, maybe in the past year, to only then withdraw it at the last minute? What is the reaction going to be of Arab countries who supported Egypt and, of course, the Palestinians who I believe really pushed and initiated Egypt to do this?
Well, we are disappointed, of course, and we have expressed that very clearly. The Egyptians presented this resolution on our request as Palestinians. So practically, we have the real ownership of this resolution as Palestinians, as PLO. But it's always presented in cooperation with Arab countries. And Egypt is the only Arab country on the Security Council of the UN, and it was natural that Egypt would present it. But saying that, we are still hopeful that they will reverse this decision, and if they don't, we are still hopeful that other countries will present it down, because what we see today are very dangerous. You just asked about Trump administration. There are very dangerous signs coming from this administration when they appoint a person like Friedman, who supports illegal settlements, who calls on annexing parts of the West Bank, who wants to move the American embassy to Jerusalem. This is very dangerous policy because it means that the United States is participating in violating international law and in violating the International Court of Justice resolution and practically violating a principle that has dominated international relations for years after the Second World War, that is inadmissibility of annexing land by force. Settlements are illegal. Settlers are illegal. This is not my opinion or Palestinian opinion. This is the opinion of international law. This is the opinion of UN resolutions. This is the opinion of the world community. And the settlements have to stop. Otherwise, there will be no peace in this place.
Well, before I come back to Mr. Revivi for redress on what you've just said, let me just bring in some background for you. It's unprecedented for an incoming president in the US to weigh in on foreign policy before taking office, but Donald Trump has been outspoken on this issue, and in Facebook he wrote that the resolution being considered at the United Nations Security Council regarding Israel should be vetoed. As the United States has long maintained peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians, that will only come through direct negotiations between the parties and not through the imposition of terms by the United Nations. This puts Israel in a very poor negotiating position and is extremely unfair to all Israelis. Mr. Revivi, can I bring you in here? Obviously, you have the support of the incoming president-elect. How do you marry the fact that you are, as Israel, as a country, a bona fide, recognised sovereign state within the United Nations, yet you want to cherry-pick what chastisement, if that's a better phrase to put it, that the United Nations places on Israel? How do you reconcile that, and what's the argument for Israel is being picked on?
Well, I think basically if you go and count the amount of resolutions that were made against Israel as opposed to the amount of resolutions that were made against Syria, you'll understand why we have very good claim and strong claim to say that we're being picked on. But that's besides the point. I'm not looking for justification of the international community. The Egyptians are suffering from the Palestinians even worse than what the Israelis are suffering from the Palestinians. The settlements are not illegal. Israel has got very thick legal documentation and arguments as to why we have every right to build in Judea and Samaria. But that's also not the argument. Barghouti is trying to say that building buildings is against the international law. But he is not obeying any
Mr. Barghouti, let Mr. Revivi have his say.
There
Please,
is
Mr. Revivi, carry on.
law you are not abiding by, and you are acting as thugs and thieves that are stealing the land of others.
Mr. Barghouti, if you have any decent respect, allow the other person to respond as well. You are not allowing me to speak,
like
which is just an indication, it's just an indication as to how you act your Palestinian Authority. You don't respect private individuals. You are the ones who are hurting innocent women and children, slaughtering them in the beds.
What private individual? You stole our land.
Gentlemen, this is getting beyond.
Where did you come from, you yourself?
This is getting beyond the proviso, the area that we want to discuss. Let's try and not get into personal insults, but more so focus back on the relationship between your country and the Palestinian Authority and Egypt. Mr. Revivi, the relationship between Egypt and Israel has been tense. In the last 5 years, we've seen 3 changes of president. We've seen Mubarak, then we saw Morsi, and now we see Sisi. In terms of what's happened in the last 48 hours, how do you analyse the relationship now between Egypt and Israel? Is it as close as it ever has been before?
I definitely think it's a great insight as to what we see that's been happening under the table, underground, for quite a long period of time, and all of a sudden the Egyptian president woke up and had the courage to stand in front of the world and said, you know what, Israel is right. If you want peace with the Palestinians, just like Egypt did it with direct talks, then the Palestinians are more than welcome. Mr. Barghouti, Dr. Barghouti lives 15 minutes away from my house. He's more than welcome to come to my house and come and negotiate peace. I invited Palestinians just a few weeks ago to my house just to have breakfast together and discuss how we can make reality better. The outcome was that the Palestinian Authority arrested them because of having a social meeting with a settler. So that's a real big crime to have coffee with a settler. That's the way the Palestinian Authority treats their own residents. That's why there's no hope for peace. Well, that's the Palestinian leadership.
You are invading
there
our
are people,
houses
Palestinian
and our
people
offices
who are
and
suffering from their own
moving.
leadership. People
want
are
to
more
peace?
than happy to have peace negotiations with me and my peers, and you can come to Efrat and see what is coexistence, what is a peaceful relationship, and what gives hope to reach a better understanding for the future.
Okay.
Blaming us for doing things which we don't do won't bring it any closer.
Mr. Barghouti,
can I live in Jaffa?
Mr. Barghouti, I'll let you respond.
Answer me. Can I live in Jerusalem? Please. I want to say something. First of all, negotiations have been used by Israel for 23 years to obstruct peace. They have used negotiations as a cover for increasing the number of illegal settlers from 111,000
And you've been
to
using terror to
700,000.
cover peace.
So negotiations are nothing but a cover.
To cover peace,
if they
Mr.
want
Barghouti.
peace, why don't they withdraw their occupying force from the occupied territories that they occupied in 1967 and allow us to have our independent
There
state?
was no peace
He's
prior
inviting
to
me to talk, but let me
either,
tell him,
Mr. Barghouti.
I was born in Jerusalem.
Okay.
I
There was
worked
no
as a
peace
medical
prior
doctor
to
in Jerusalem for
1967.
Gentlemen are
15
shouting much
years,
between you
and
here
the
is not
Israeli
going to...
army arrested me 5 times because I entered the city I was born in.
It seems that...
Let me talk, please. I was arrested because I entered the city
The
I was born in.
1967 war
We are
was opened
prohibited
by
from
people
going
of
to
your
Gaza,
nation, Mr.
prohibited
Barghouti.
from going to Jerusalem. We are under occupation. The occupying Israeli army invaded our offices.
The occupation has
just
brought
a
you
month
better
ago
rights than you had
at
before.
2 in the morning and destroyed everything.
The occupation
Okay.
has
Is
brought
that
you
the
running
behavior
water,
of
Mr.
people who want
Barghouti.
peace? So let's be straight and clear. If Israel and if you want peace, you have to take away your army from our occupied territories. You have to allow us to be free. You have to allow us to have our independent state, including
And allow
Jerusalem.
you to slaughter
your
our
settlements
kids in
are
bed.
illegal,
And
they
allow
will
you
not
to
stop
slaughter our
us
kids
from
in bed,
fighting
right?
for struggle
Okay,
for
let me just
freedom.
bring in... I think
they
we've
will
heard...
not stop us from struggling for having real, just peace.
Okay, let's just take a breather there for a moment, and let me just bring in Timothy here, Kaldas. It seems that the impasses over the last 6 decades are just never going to go away, and it doesn't matter whether the international community gets involved, Timothy, or whether it's a negotiated direct talks peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians. One wonders what the role of Egypt can be, considering what Egypt has gone through over the last 5 years. Egypt has been a linchpin from those initial peace accords signed under President Carter in the 1970s. There was great hope then that something could be achieved. What is Egypt's role now, considering what's even just happened in the last 24 hours?
I think the unfortunate reality is neither Egypt nor, frankly, most nations involved have a sincere commitment to resolving this conflict or to addressing the concerns of the Palestinian people. I think it's a political football for them. It's a mechanism through which they hope to score diplomatic or political points vis-a-vis one another. And it's a sad reality. I mean, if Egypt was really committed to improving the humanitarian situation for the Palestinians, we would see the siege on Gaza be alleviated from the Egyptian side. We're not really seeing that on the scale that would be required. With respect to the commitment to negotiations, I think Mr. Barghouti makes a very valid point, which is that if the Israelis were sincere about using negotiations to resolve this conflict and to establish 2 states, they wouldn't be expanding their grip on the territory they were negotiating over. And the reality is that the settlements expanded at a dramatic pace throughout the 90s, undermining the ability for there to be a resolution peacefully, and also undermining the ability for there to be a viable state in the territory that they were negotiating over. Now, that speaks to a lack of sincerity, in my opinion.
Well, let's just give some of our viewers the background to those settlements. And of course, Israeli settlements have expanded into Palestinian territory at a rapidly increasing rate over the past few decades. Now, Israel has built 147 settlements in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem. And almost 100 settler outposts have been set up in the West Bank without the approval of the Israeli government. There are about 400,000 settlers living on Palestinian territory in the West Bank, with another 200,000 in East Jerusalem. Mr. Revivi, can I just bring you back in here? One of the main obstacles to any long-term peace that can be negotiated in the region is this whole issue about settlements, building settlements and those settlements that do exist. Do you see any future where and any peace negotiations where settlements cannot be discussed?
Well, the future is if you start reporting facts and not myths. There's no Palestinian land. There wasn't a Palestinian state prior to 1967, and there was no peace prior to 1967 before there were any settlements. We had 2 prime ministers offering between 92 to 96% of the land. Both offers were rejected by the Palestinians. Jordan, who actually occupied the land before Israel, waived their rights over Judea, Samaria, and East Jerusalem. It's not a matter over a piece of land or whether we build or don't build. It's about the right of Jewish people to live in the state of Israel and to live there here freely without being afraid that we'll be slaughtered in our beds. Mr. Barghouti is ignoring the fact that with the cities which are under the Palestinian Authority, they have been becoming a place where Palestinians breed terrorists, and after they being killed during their attacks, they name streets and traffic circles to glorify those people who kill innocent civilians.
Mr. Revivi, we're getting into the realms of a party political broadcast here, and again we're getting away from the subject.
It's discussing the facts.
They are your opinions, but
they
are your opinions, sir. But we're also trying to work out what that relationship of Egypt is at this present moment in time, and how that actually benefits Israel, and how it supports Israel, or it supports the Palestinians.
Egypt has woke up. Egypt has woke up, and just like the Egyptians are suffering in Sinai from the Gaza occupied by the Palestinians, their alliance today is stronger to Israel. Israel is providing them intelligence information that they will be able to battle against the Palestinian terrorists.
I'm going to bring in Timothy Kaldas here.
There's no siege over Gaza. We've seen it, how much they've built during the period of siege.
Let me bring in Timothy Kaldas to what you've just said there. If Israel is supporting and helping Egypt with security information, could that have been one of the pivots around which this decision was overturned, the security issue that it is evident in the landmass between Egypt and Israel, the Sinai?
Look, the reality is, since the summer of 2013, Israel has provided a lot of support to the Egyptian government and has been very happy to have Sisi in power. When there were discussions in Congress about suspending aid to Egypt over the overthrow of a democratically elected president, the Israelis and AIPAC, the most formidable pro-Israeli lobby in Washington, advocated very strongly that Congress not do that, and they were successful. The suspension came later over other issues, but with respect to the actual overthrow, there was no suspension. Now, on top of that, Egypt's counterterrorism efforts in Sinai would be impossible without Israeli approval, because they couldn't move that much military hardware into Sinai without approval because of the Camp David Agreement. So there's no doubt that there's cooperation on security. There's no doubt that there's political support being provided by Israel. And the reality is that the relationship between Egypt and Israel today is stronger with one another than it is vis-a-vis the United States for either of them. Now, that is likely to change when Trump comes into office, but at the moment, both of them have a pretty strained relationship with the Obama administration. So this is not that surprising.
OK, Mr. Barghouti, if this resolution is dead in the water, what is the next step for the Palestinians, and how will they then relate their grievances, not just with Egypt, but with the Arab League as well?
Well, we will not give up. Of course, having this resolution is only one form. We will still keep pushing for having the resolution before Mr. Trump comes to office. We will also go to every United Nations organization. We will challenge Israel and the United States. And let me tell you, when Arabs made peace with Israel, Israel enhanced settlement activities. Before Egypt made the agreement of peace with Israel, there were only 22,000 settlers in the West Bank and Jerusalem. After peace with Egypt, they became 111,000. After Palestinians recognized Israel and had Oslo Agreement, Israel increased the number of illegal settlers to 700,000. Today, the settlers are nothing but a cancer that is killing the very last opportunity for peace. You've heard this settler who said that there was no Palestine.
I will not hear that.
He says that Palestinians are occupying Gaza. To him, he's so racist that he's calling for practically the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people. Please shut up, because I want to finish my point. I didn't interrupt you. Shut up. He is claiming that there were no Palestinians here, and he's behaving as a racist, as you can see, and as an occupier who is not even allowing me to speak. He cannot do that, and you should stop him. But I believe that this behavior is exactly reflecting the spirit and the kind of behavior of the Israeli society today, and especially the settlers in Israel.
OK, I'm afraid, Mr. Barghouti, we do have to leave it.
They are behaving as thieves who steal the land of Palestinians, and they should be stopped.
Well, we'll see how this does transpire. It's a very big subject, and I'm sure we will be coming back to it in the future. Unfortunately, there we have to leave it. But I'd like to thank all of my guests in Bethlehem, Mustafa Barghouti, in Cairo, Timothy Kaldas, and in West Jerusalem, Mr. Oded Ravivi. Thank you so much for your time here on this edition of Inside Story. And thank you for watching as well. You can see the programme again anytime by visiting our website at aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is at AJ Inside Story. From me, Sohail Rahman, and all of the team, thanks very much for your time and your company.